sometimes I think, and I feel guilty about it because I helped push them into becoming Hell's Angels. But I think that they perhaps were the most unique bike club in the world and never will be matched again. Maybe I should show that plaque. This is the Saint Slave patch. This is one of my prized possessions. This was given to me by a San Fernando Valley Hell's Angel named Dana that was a Satan slave prior to that. I used to, when I was a question mark hang around, I would go over to Dana's house and sleep on his couch. And him and I became very close. And after they became Hell's Angels, they're very protective of their stuff. They wouldn't allow anybody outside the Satan slaves to have this. But it's just a unique patch. It was a solid patch. And if you'll notice, there's a real chain here. They're chained to the handlebars of the motorcycle. And here's the image of the devil, Satan's slaves in San Fernando Valley. But this is probably one of the most unique motorcycle clubs ever to ride in Southern California, perhaps the world. I mean, they were a real unique bunch of guys. Now, what you also have to understand is this is what their paddle looked like when they passed out SWATs. Their paddle was exactly the same, except it had a long handle on it. I don't remember any holes being drilled in it, but if you got in trouble with the sergeant at arms, you could buy the disciplinary SWAT in a bidding war, and sometimes people would pay $200, $300, $400 for to SWAT somebody they were pissed off at. And they also, when you got voted in the club, they had a gauntlet. You had to go down the gauntlet before you could become an official member. But I've got a great story of there was a guy called Crazy Mike. He was a newer Satan slave. He never became a Hell's Angel. He was so crazy, he didn't last that long. But as a Hell's Angel, I was a Hell's Angel from Los Angeles, and he had the paddle. They were moving the clubhouse, and he had the Satan slave paddle on the back of his motorcycle, and he was going to do something, and he took the paddle off and handed it to me. And this was kind of a little rivalry between the Hells Angels and the Satan slaves. So I bungee corded to my ape hangers on the front, and I took off. And Mike was chasing me all over the valley. I had the Satan slave paddle for a brief period. It's like having somebody's flag. And I wound up taking it over to Dana's house, and I left it with Dana. And I told Mike it had blown off my bike. I didn't know where in the hell it was. And he thought he was going to have to go to the meeting on Friday and explain to the Satan slaves that he had lost their traditional Satan slaves paddle. I met the Satan slaves and became really close with them through the question marks, but Little John stole the motor from me in my bike shop. And I went to the question mark. I said, you need to get Little John on the phone. He stole my motor today. And I had a knucklehead motor, and he got me distracted, and somebody walked out and they put it in his car. I didn't notice it till after he left. And man, I was hot on it. And I went to David Brown's house. I said, I want to talk to Little John. And so David called him and said, hey, man, something happened today? And Little John's playing dumb. And I said, David, let me talk to him. David's going, I'm not a patch holder. I don't have that on the pecking order, man. I don't grab the phone and start jacking up a Satan slave. So I grabbed the phone from David, and I basically told Little John, I said, look, I'm not going to go to the cops. I don't fucking believe in the cops. I said, that motor is coming back to me. And I said, either you give me my motor back or you shoot me in the head the next time you see me. I said, because I'm coming for it. And Little John just said, fucking crazy, man. And I go, I may be. I said, but I want my motor back. And Little John gave me the motor. I went and got the motor. Little John and I became really close and good friends. I went and got the motor, and he gave me the motor back, but he just had to keep the manifold. So he's giving me the motor back, and I look and I go, "Where's the manifold?" And did he need it? I don't know, but he looked at me and smiled and goes, "Can I borrow it?" And I go, "No, I'm going to give it to you because you ain't fucking going to give it back to me." And he laughed. He thought it was really funny that I knew that he had to just keep something from that job, And the Satan slaves had a different philosophy about it. Well, I think the Satan slaves kind of held the record for stealing bikes in San Fernando Valley. And they would go around and look for dressers. They would wear the leather suit. So they look like a dresser rider. They'd wear a leather suit and they'd put on, of course, nobody wore helmets back then, but they'd put on a helmet and they'd go hot wire a bike. And, these guys had a team. They would put a couple of guys in the leather suits, helmets, and they'd drive around. They'd see a bagger off by itself. They could hot wire it in seconds and, ride it to a pre-designated location. And I had a house up in Ojai Valley, and the slaves more than once showed up there on a hot bike. And I wasn't into stealing bikes. I wasn't a bike thief. I just thought it was kind of not a cool thing to do. But, and, when I became leader of the Ventura Hells Angels, our rule in town was we didn't allow any bike thieving up in Ventura. It just didn't matter if it was a Hells Angels bike, orphan's bike, a loner's bike. You did not steal bikes in Ventura County. We wanted the bikes to sit on the street unlocked by themselves. Like one of the biggest insults back in the old days, if you came to Ventura and you pulled up to our bar, the Red Cove or the Star Bar, and you locked your bike, you would be asked to unlock it and leave. And if you didn't, you got your ass kicked for insulting and disrespecting us. Basically, you calling us a thief, and that's the way it was dealt with. Now, Satan slaves were very tight with Oakland because Animal had been a question mark, and with Russell Bea, because Russell had been a Satan slave. So they were very close. Sonny had come up to the Bay Area, and some Hells Angels were going to steal his knucklehead. He had that classic knucklehead with dual carburetors on it. Did ultimately get stolen, and I helped him recover it years later, but this is 10 years earlier. He'd been riding that bike a long time. And Sonny told Louis he wanted to see him. And Louis told me the story. Sonny didn't tell me the story. And Louis said he walked into Sonny's house. Sonny was fiddling with a rifle in the front room. And he said, "Hey, Louis, what's happening?" He goes, "I hear you got some people interested in your motorcycle." And word had been out that they were going to steal his bike. And he goes, "Yeah, ain't nobody going to steal my bike." He goes, "No disrespect." He goes, "I don't give a fuck who they are, Ralph. Hells Angels or not, no one's stealing my bike." And Sonny said, "Well, you know what? I'm with you." And he took the rifle and he threw it at him. And Louis said he caught it. He goes, "You might need that." He goes, "Don't be afraid to use it." That was kind of Sonny telling Louis that he wasn't going to let nobody steal his bike and he was going to back his play. And I'll tell you later, the people that were talking about stealing his bike, Slave Louis went to prison because a cop was fucking with one of the Hells Angels members from that charter. I think it was Daly City. And Louis beat the cop up and went to prison for it. And Louis, that just kind of gave Louis a carte blanche with the Hells Angels, I don't know. I never Little John stole my motor, but he also gave it back to me when I confronted him. And so were they did they, what I think they did it for sport. I really think they did it for sport more than anything. That the San Fernando Valley belonged to the Saint and slaves, and it did. We're in a gas station one night. The Saint and slaves and the Hell's Angels. I'm in the Hell's Angels now, and this psychologist from UCLA is I don't know if he's a professor or if he's a practicing psychologist. He's throwing out all these credentials, and the slaves always had the finest looking women around them, and a lot of them had property of Satan slaves tattooed on their ass. I've got somebody just sent me a picture of a Satan slave property patch tattoo. So this guy's asking us all these, questions that you'd think a prison psychiatrist would ask you about society. And so the slaves, the slaves go, "We're going to put this guy up to the test." So one of the slaves asked him, "How'd you like this girl?" The fucking guy takes the girl out behind the dumpster and fucks her. That's the Satan slaves, and that's the world we were living in. I'll tell you this little story, and it'll distinguish the difference between a 1% club and perhaps just a regular wannabe type outlaw motorcycle club. Now, I'm not going to name the other club. They may still be around, and, they were good guys and invited us to their annual Halloween party. We went over to Santa Monica, Venice area. We're showing up at their party, and it does give them clout. The Hells Angels and the Satan slaves are going to be at our party, and everyone's got to make this party because these biker celebrities, if you will, are going to be there. So it adds clout to them. So we get over there, and these guys have never partied with a 1% club, I don't think, and never partied with the slaves. And the slaves, the Hells Angels party hard, but, the slaves are kind of in a class of their own, in a sense. And so we get there. Now, they have games lined up. It's Halloween, it's a Halloween party. Some of the people are in costumes and stuff. And so we start acting up, I'm coming as a Hell's Angel, and the slaves. We're coming as Satan slaves. And people are starting to drink and get rowdy and, drugs passed around and whatnot. So they start eating. They're going to have a dunking for apples game. And so the slaves immediately eat all the apples bobbing around in the water. And so the leader of the club comes to me and he goes, "You're ruining the game," and I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy's out of his element. And I said, well, I don't think I'd mention it to him. And he's kind of, really? And I go, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. So the party is we're starting to party, we're getting in the groove, and it's getting wild. And we finally decide it's a drag. But on the way out, Louis talks the president's girlfriend into going with him back to San Fernando Valley. So it's like we were like marauding. We maraud the party. We jump on our bikes. Now, when we rode together, the slaves and the angels rode together, we always had an angel up front and a slave up front. So I'm up front and Louis up front. Now Louis got the leader of this motorcycle club, his old lady, on the back of his bike. And she's happy as hell now. She's with the real outlaw now. Louis' imaginations is probably getting this big of what's going to happen later that night. And we make our way back to San Fernando Valley. And I don't think we're at the clubhouse. I think we're at Louis' house. And the phone starts ringing. And it's the leader of the bike club from where we just left. He wants his girlfriend back. And so they're tossing the phone around, and finally he asks to speak to me. He asks, "Is George there? Let me talk to George." So I get on the phone, and he wants to negotiate his girlfriend back. And I said, "Man," I said, "what did you expect? When you invited us?" And I'm trying to have a rational conversation with him without demeaning him any more than he already has been. So he said, "Look, will you do me one solid?" And I go, "What do you want?" He goes, "Please send my girlfriend back. Bring her back to me." And so I talk it over with Louis, and so Louis agrees to give the girl back. And then Louis sends her home with a Greyhound from San Fernando Valley back over the hill to her old stomping grounds. So these are some of the things some of these little smaller clubs would encounter with us. I went with John once to a clubhouse. I think it was might have been the Humpers. It was a small little club in the valley. And John was upset because the Humpers had turned out his daughter. And I think people know what a turnout is. And it's not a place where you turn your car around. But so she gets turned out. John gets wind of it. And John goes over, never said a word to me. This is like the old days. He told me, "Get on your bike." I got on my bike. Jesse got on his bike. I don't know who else. There was just a small group of us, and we went over to this clubhouse. Had no reason, no idea why we were there. No reason why we were over there. John asked for a guy. The guy walks up, goes, "Yeah, I'm so-and-so." John just clocks this guy, just hit him, just knocked him flat out. Waits for the guy to wake up. Now, John hit him. Let's give you a little insight into the outlaw bike world at that particular point in time. John didn't hit him because he disrespected his daughter. John hit him because he disrespected John. There's nothing about the daughter. I don't even think John got along with her. It was, "You disrespected me by sexually disrespecting my daughter." And John looked around the room. "Anybody got a problem?" And, of course, nobody said a goddamn thing in that matter. It's like every once in a while, I'll post on social media that in the old days, if you were running around with a vest on, I never wore a vest until I became a Hell's Angel prospect. Because if you wore a vest, that meant you were a prospect or associate. Now, the Satan slaves didn't give their prospects any type of, prospective or whatever. If you were a Satan slave prospect, you were allowed to wear a Levi cutoff, not a leather cutoff, a Levi cutoff, because the slaves did not allow their members to wear leather. In the beginning, they all wore Levi's. And if you showed up in San Fernando Valley with a Levi, with the sleeves cut off, you could wear a Levi vest, a Levi jacket, but if you cut the sleeves off, you were encroaching on what they considered part of their tradition of identifying themselves as Satan slaves. That's what the Satan slave prospects wore. And I saw more than one guy get his ass beat, because he was wearing a Levi with the sleeves cut off. It was a sleeveless Levi vest. And, nowadays it would be a full-time job, going around collecting Levi vests. But it was a different day, different standards. People, I was talking to somebody earlier about it's this walk or woke. I don't even know how you say it, because it doesn't interest me. It's like there's certain things and certain standards that you adhere to and you respect, and nobody's entitled. You want respect, fucking earn it. Show me the same respect back.